An introduction to rubrics. Hi, John. You look frustrated. Are you all right?
I was teaching my students how to write an essay, but I feel I am such a failure.
What happened?
Well, my students don't seem to be clear about what it takes to write a good economics essay.
I see. Have you tried using rubrics?
Oh. What are rubrics? How can rubrics help me?
What is a rubric? It is a scoring tool that lays out the specific expectations for an assignment. It divides the assignment into its component parts. It provides a detailed description of what constitutes acceptable or unacceptable levels of performance for each of those parts.
Great. How do I get started?
Here, let me show you. There are 4 parts to a rubric. The first part is the title and task description, which are usually placed at the top of the rubric. The second part comprises the scale and levels. The scale describes how well or poorly any given task has been performed. We usually consider 3 to be an optimum number of levels. But in actual fact, there is no set formula for the number of levels a rubric scale should have. Choose a number of levels that corresponds with your requirements for grading. In economics, we have L1, L2, L3 for extended writing, and hence 3 levels of proficiencies. Dimensions and strands are next. Dimensions lay out parts of the task simply and completely. They should be neutrally phrased and listed along the left side of the rubric. If all the dimensions are reflected in one strand, then it is a holistic rubric. If one dimension is reflected per strand, then it is an analytic rubric. The last part of a rubric are the descriptions. Descriptions describes a certain quality of performance that corresponds to a particular level for a particular dimension.
I know. Our levels of response marking used for marking of tests and examinations is a rubric.
Yes, you are quite right. But do you know that this is actually a holistic, specific rubric? All the dimensions, or component skills, of writing a good essay are combined and reflected holistically. In addition, as you can see, the descriptions are specific to that question only.
Is there a problem with that? Can I just use this as my rubric?
Of course you can. However, do consider what is the purpose of the rubric. If you are using the rubric for formative assessment, an analytic and generic rubric would be better. You see, an analytic rubric breaks down into the individual dimensions essential to the successful enactment of the performance. Therefore, students can ascertain where exactly their strengths and weaknesses lie. Teachers also have the ability to zoom into the specific dimension that needs further instruction. In addition, if the rubric is crafted generically, the descriptions of performance can be used over and over again with different questions. It can be shared with students at the beginning of the course as a tool to communicate the success criteria to them. Over time, students will soon learn and remember the general qualities of good essay writing.
That's wonderful. May I know what do I put down for my dimensions?
That depends what you might consider to be important for economics essay writing. To sum up, your dimensions need to be 1. Appropriate and relevant to essay writing, 2. Definable, 3. Observable, 4. Different and distinct from one another, and lastly, 5. Able to support varying descriptions along a continuum of quality. For example, the dimensions for writing a good economics essay are presence of evaluative stand, analytical breadth and depth, application to context, relevance to the question requirements, and content accuracy.
What about answers for case studies? I think reference to economic information is important too.
John, that is not a problem. You can add this as a dimension too. Ultimately, what you identify as the dimensions and what you name them as are collective decisions you and your department teachers need to make.
I get it. Sorry, Miss Econs. I have one more question. How do I craft the descriptions that clearly reflects the quality of performance at each level?
You can include numerical descriptions. In some cases, the more representations of a given descriptor, the better the rubric score. At other times, less is more, as when assessing the number of errors. Alternatively, you can rely on value-embedded terminologies to delineate levels of good, better and best in terms of performance. Or you can describe how the skill aspects demonstrated have increased as the level of proficiency increases. However, the aspects of the overall skill to be attained do not need to be accumulated in a specific sequence or order. Lastly, you can also write descriptions that keep the previous skills while adding more skills as the level of proficiency increases. But in this case, the sequence has to be in a predetermined order.
I am going to give rubrics a try. Thank you, Miss Econs.
All the best, John.